first met Reuben Wu when I was Director of Exhibitions at FACT in Liverpool, when he was one of the coolest musicians in the city, co-founding the band Ladytron and shaping a distinctive sound that travelled around the world. Years on, he's one of the most singular photographers working anywhere. His images are commissioned by Apple and National Geographic, for whom he reimagined Stonehenge as if you were seeing it for the first time. In this episode, we explore Reuben's extraordinary journey from a Liverpool kid who dreamed of becoming a successful artist to an industrial designer, a musician, and then to one of the most amazing visual artists working today. Reuben rigs lights to drones and walks into deserts and snowstorms at night to make work no machine could ever fake. Because, as he says, AI can simulate the result but never the process. And he is fierce about something most artists are frightened of. That the artist, not the gallery or the auction house, is the best person to sell and speak for their own work. If you've ever wished someone else would do the talking for you, this one's for you. Please follow the show so you never miss an episode. I hope you find this one as inspiring as I did. Welcome to the Extraordinary Creatives podcast. Reuben, so brilliant to have you here. Where are you joining us from?
I'm currently in Chicago in the USA. My band Ladytron were touring and we would do a lot of tours of the USA. Chicago was always one of the big cities that we would travel through and perform in. And so during one tour, one of my friends brought one of her friends, and we hit it off and we did the long distance thing. And I started to spend more and more time in the USA. I was living in London at the time. I would spend most of the year in the US, and I'd come back to the UK to renew my visa, and then I'd go back. So eventually we, got engaged, got married, and I moved over here permanently.
Amazing. It's really interesting to me. We're going to come to it a little bit because we first met in Liverpool many moons ago. And I have to say, I love Chicago. In fact, I think it's one of my favourite US cities. And I found a real resonance there with Liverpool in a strange way. There was something about the context that I really connected with. So I'm going to understand a little bit more about what that's like for you in a moment. But I wonder if you could share with us, where do you do your making? Are you coming from a studio? Do you work in a studio at home?
I wish I had a studio at home. I have this quite small room that I'm speaking from at the moment. And I do a lot of my creative thinking here in front of the screen with digital tools. But the other half happens out, in the middle of nowhere in nature at night by myself. Quite often I do my thinking, behind the wheel while I'm driving road trips. It's one of the times when I can kind of be on autopilot and allow myself to kind of think without too much focus while I'm doing something else. And I feel that those are that kind of state that my brain is in is at quite an open state, and is open for new ideas just to come in and for me to kind of entertain those.
Yeah, it's a great creative hack, isn't it? Doing something else at the same time. Either that's why ideas come in the shower or wandering. But interesting to know that you know that that's part of your process now. Curious about that time in the studio. Have you carved out every day to be in the studio? Because you have a family too. How does it pan out, your kind of days committed to the practice at the moment?
Every day. I work from home. So I don't really have a studio. I have, this printer behind me where I could make reasonably large prints. I wish I had more space to do these kinds of things and to do kind of practical work in a studio. And I could possibly do that, but I feel that me having a family, it's actually quite nice to be at home, to be at,
Yeah.
to be with the family and working at the same time. And there's always things that I can be working on too. It's not just the shoots, the jobs that come through. It's also other things like working on personal projects, planning future projects, working on prints, working on my website, all those kinds of things. So my to-do list is always, incredibly long.
Yeah, I know listeners will be nodding their heads violently in that ever expanding list. So you say you're in the studio every day. Are you a kind of morning person? Do you have a ritual when you get up and start working? Is that how do you get into that flow state?
So my youngest is he's not 2 years old yet, and so that kind of has forced me to wake up earlier in the morning and to go to go to sleep earlier in the night. So I usually wake up around about 6 a.m. and have coffee, have like a smoothie, and go through my go through my calendar and my to-do list and try and figure out what I'm going to do for the day. Try and fit in some exercise at some point, and also some family time. So there is a kind of a kind of schedule that I keep, which kind of takes me up to about 10:30 when I try and get to bed.
Yeah. Is there anything in the studio that kind of helps you feel inspired, or do you surround yourself with any objects or kind of totems of things?
You should see my desk right now. I'm a thing person. I like objects, and so I like to have these at hand and to kind of have something in my hand while I'm kind of thinking about things. I have a sketchbook that I use to plan certain images. My background before all of this is actually in drawing from a very young age. So it's actually the most natural way for me to jot down ideas. What else do I have? I have Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt's Oblique Strategies,
Aha.
the cards,
Yeah, fabulous.
which I love. Gardening, not architecture. Slow preparation, fast execution. Abandon normal instruments. Don't break the silence. Nice little prompts.
Brian's a really good connecting point, actually, in terms of some of the music influences, which we'll talk through. But it's really good to get a sense of you and the kind of that handheld, because you also work with cameras and objects, but I'm also thinking of whether you pick up any kind of objects on your travels and bring them back to the studio. Is it important for you to record your journeys other than through photography?
I used to pick up rocks and pebbles and stuff like that from places and bring them home, but I've stopped doing that just because if everyone does that, then there'll be nothing left in these places. So now I take photos, lots of them, and that's my memory, especially on my iPhone. My iPhone photo library is basically my visual memory. That that I can access and kind of go back in time and see what I was doing at a certain date. So that's how I do that.
Lovely.
Also, I feel that the images that I create in a location are the special moments. That is the souvenir, and even though they might not be seen in front of me with my naked eye, they're always seen through long exposure or things like that. Those become my memory of a place. It's almost like placing false memories in my mind of a place, which is
Yes.
kind of a cool way to think about traveling and exploring.
Yeah. Well, I think before we time travel back to some of the origins of all this, I wonder if we could bring it alive for our audience and walk through a recent project that gives us a sense of your process and tell us how the project came about, how you kind of developed it, and then what you ended with.
I think my Siren series is probably the best example to share. It's more of a breakthrough moment than an actual project. And it all started in 2022 when I made a pencil sketch of an image that I didn't know how to make. And this is the sketch. Is that better? Okay, you can see. Yeah, okay. So this is a light painting that is soft and three-dimensional, and at that point in time I wasn't able to make it, and it actually took me the next few years like trying to figure it out, and it came to the summer of 2024 when my family we take a week in on the shore of Lake Michigan, on a little house, and this house is right on the beach, and this allowed me to do some photography and to experiment with this new kind of light technology that I was experimenting with. And I was actually out that night expecting a meteor shower, and for the meteors to kind of go through the sky while I do the light painting. But my light painting wasn't doing anything. I think, the angle that I was at, the pictures weren't coming out as they should. And so I was a little bit lost with that. But then all of a sudden, I noticed this green glow 90 degrees to the north. And I suddenly panned the camera this way and took a picture just to see what it was. And it was the aurora borealis. And this was in summer, and I was wearing a t-shirt. And usually I see this stuff, in the polar regions, in the bitter cold. But this was happening in front of me, at extremely low latitudes. And by panning the camera, I started, what happened with my light painting took on a different direction, where the waves, which were now washing across the image, across the frame, did something to the laser and created a completely new shape that I wasn't expecting.
Wow.
And so it was at that moment I realized that I had, by accident, actually created what I'd sketched many years ago.
Wow.
So, yeah.
By accident?
And I realized, by accident, by serendipity.
Yes.
Which has, it's happened quite a few times over the course of my life. And, I felt like I was, not photographing the landscape anymore. I was photographing the forces that shaped the landscape. And so that was quite an important moment for me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think that this more and more recently, I've been thinking about the creative people that I work with, how that serendipity comes out of making a series of decisions, and that actually you put yourself in the place, and you were already open to seeing and receiving those things. So I think, in a way, that happy accident is also the result of desiring and kind of almost conjuring it through being in the right place at the right time and having the equipment, the creative equipment with you to kind of access it. But I wonder if we could just sit back for a second and describe for our particularly listeners rather than viewers on YouTube what you mean by light painting, because I think we can kind of bring that alive even more.
So light painting is an approach to making a long exposure photograph where the shutter of the camera is open for a long period of time, like a few seconds. And during that few seconds, a light is moved through the frame in a certain way, in any way. And once that picture once the shutter shuts back again, you have an image which shows that duration of time and the movement of that light. So that's essentially what it is. It's like a paintbrush, but with light. And I've been doing that since 2016, 2015 with the light on the drone, and that has enabled me to draw these shapes and lines in the sky and in remote landscapes. And what I find really interesting about these is the kind of tension between the drawn light and the landscape that it's illuminating.
Yes.
And so this most recent project called Siren, the whole, rather than me creating these geometric signs and forms within a landscape, it's more like the landscape has started to shape what I'm doing. So it's become almost like a collaboration between me and the forces of nature. So it's still light painting, but it's a lot more. I'm almost surrendering to the forces of nature rather than controlling what I'm doing with the light.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way of thinking about it. So the image that you ended up with, I mean, they're striking. We're going to include some in the videos that we put out because they're so beautiful. But you can sort of feel the surprise in them, so I think that the kind of the magical quality and that kind of liminal space that I no doubt you experienced yourself is really in the atmosphere of the photographs that you create. People talk about them being otherworldly, but I love the fact that you're actually talking about it as being a collaboration with nature, that you're in a way, it's a call and response, a little bit like in music. It kind of takes me back to what you must have developed in the sort of in the band when there's four of you kind of making connections and kind of expanding on each other's work in some way. There's a kind of an extra space that opens up because you're bringing something together. How does it, when you're actually making the photographs and you're on site and you're witnessing the light being drawn in space and the Aurora Borealis taking place, how do you stay in the moment of making and not just be flooded with awe so that you're kind of immobilized? And how do you stay in the capturing moment?
I think that's craft, and that's how you learn to operate the camera, how you learn to use your tools, which where you eventually become instinctive with it, and it just becomes a process that you don't have to think about. And so when something is given to you, when you suddenly receive something from something else, suddenly there's a rare moment, then you can be there to capture that and capture it properly, using the camera without thinking about it, and being able to do all the focusing and exposure things, and kind of work while the images are created, and while and as nature continues to develop. And my sense of awe is definitely there. I'm not shutting that out. I am, it's this strange flow state that I'm able to go into where I feel like I'm part of the universe and part of the environment, but at the same time, I am separate, being able to capture it.
That's so beautifully put. I think it's great to hear that it's much more fluid, in that moment, because you've learnt the craft so well that it's like an extension of you. So you can move with it and be much more organic in how you respond. I'm wondering, in that case, when you're taking the photographs that time or the produce, how many photographs do you have to produce to kind of make a decision on how many you decide go into the final edit?
So I'm usually in a specific place for many hours, and I use the camera as a kind of recording instrument to capture the course of time as the light changes, and so I end up with hundreds of images, which I then have to work through, and that always comes later when I have some kind of space between me and the moment. When I'm in the moment, I'm just in this kind of keep working, keep reacting and responding. But when I'm in the studio, working with a library of images, that I'm then able to see, the story that I can possibly tell, and the fragments and the components of the story that I can kind of eventually put together. So what you're seeing with a lot of my work is kind of this totality of decisive moments rather than one single decisive moment. I think with me being a landscape photographer and not a street photographer, I'm all about the indecisive moment than the decisive one.
Could you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, so with street photography, there is always one single moment that, that is the goal, the moment of, where all of the compositional elements come in, and you take the picture and that's it. With me being a landscape photographer, or a photographer, an artist that works with cameras in the landscape, I'm thinking a lot more in terms of like geologic time and a much more kind of vast perspective. And so I don't see my work based on one specific moment in time. I see my work as part of a much larger length of time, which kind of speaks to the processes that shapes the environment and nature and that kind of thing.
So it's less about representing the experience for you in the final photograph. There's another thing. Once you get to the edit, are you trying to imbue the final photographs that you choose? How do you stop yourself from trying just to represent what you felt or what you saw, and pick something that tells that story in a slightly different way?
So I don't see any of this other than the landscape that the camera's pointed at. Because these are long exposures, and because these are light paintings, they don't exist to the naked eye. So you don't actually see that. You only see it over long exposure, what the camera has captured over a few seconds. And so I feel that these images are, a peek into another dimension. It is real. The camera has captured that, but
Yes,
it doesn't. It is not something that you can just see with the naked eye, because the naked eye is just, it's like looking in live video or something, whereas a photograph is this much time. is compressed into one frame.
So, but you've learnt the tools well enough to know that if you set it or stage it in a certain way, it's likely that it's going to create a certain result for you. But then when you see the photographs, it's like you photographed a ghost and you're seeing it for the first time. Is that right?
It is. Yeah.
Amazing. So that kind of surprise and that kind of element when you see the photographs, how would you describe, this is an impossible question, Reuben, but I have to ask as many creative people as possible. You know, that just that when you know it, the photo has got it, like it, what it, that thing that you're looking for, how would you describe that?
So I call it ecstasis, which is, and it's like an ecstatic moment where you are suddenly not within yourself anymore. You are suddenly outside yourself. You're kind of transported out. And I feel that whenever, I take a picture, every time I see a picture that I think is successful, and I'm, in this kind of flow state where I'm, responding to the images and responding to the environment. I call that this, ecstasis, which is the kind of overwhelming feeling of awe and happiness that you have been able to capture something.
I guess I made that connection that it's a transcendence that also you've experienced in music, being on stage in front of lots of people. It's a different feeling, but that moment of ecstasy or joy or bliss, it's a kind of bliss state, a kind of knowing. So you're looking for that in the creation and in the edit when you look at the photographs.
It's a slightly different one, a slightly different feeling when I'm in, back in the studio, where I am definitely not as kind of outside of myself. I'm more collected, and I'm able to use a different part of my brain to visualize and envision what the story could be.
So with this recent series where there was a happy accident kind of on purpose that you created, what were the kind of images that the light captured in the end that you said that was a turning point for you? Just if we could describe those for our listeners. It's almost like a portal or a kind of stage, a curtain that is transparent and is touching the surface of some water. So it's like a gateway in the center of the image that is iridescent and shimmering, and behind it you can see the green glow of the lights and a kind of pinky purple background. So there's that kind of liminal space, or that entry point, is quite literally what's being created in the lights there.
They're called typological images, where the camera is in one place and it's taking the same frame of the landscape, just at different moments of time. And so what you have are kind of moments which are kind of one after the other. I mean, these are just 15-second exposures.
Wow.
And to me, they read as visually, they read as curtains. I do see them as kind of windows to another dimension, a kind of thin place, into an unseen world. And I think that's what's so, why I'm drawn to them so much. And they remind me of the really old photographs of spirits and fairies from hundreds of years ago.
Yes.
Which is, ghostly and kind of playful.
Yeah, playful. I think that's right. There's a kind of a hopefulness and an optimism in a lot of the work, but there's also that kind of the real magical quality of nature, which also has a little sweet and sour in it simultaneously. And so, in that particular edit, how many photographs did you edit down to?
I think there are four,
Four.
just the ones that I showed you. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So, from what did that kind of series teach you about what was going to come next?
I think it taught me that that it is really these breakthroughs. Breakthroughs happen when you are prepared for them, when you're ready. Luck is preparation when it meets opportunity, and being able to respond to that instinctively to those moments. And that was definitely one of those moments. And it also made me realize that my work has become less about depicting a landscape and more about acknowledging it and the forces that shape it. And I think that is quite a significant change in my thinking towards how I make images. I'm thinking less about I want to go to this special place and take a picture there, and thinking more about what could happen in a place that is closer to home, that is more local. Yeah.
Interesting. So there's more a kind of responsive, that kind of interplay in the moment, and you kind of responding to the landscape as you experience it.
Yeah, it's the response, it's the intervention that I have within the image. The light has become the protagonist rather than the landscape.
Yes.
And I think that is, the main, the main distinction that like this work has to earlier landscape photography that I've done. And I feel that I was always searching for that. I was always searching for what is beyond just taking a picture and pointing a camera at something. I was always searching for some kind of something beyond beyond the landscape, beyond what is seen by the camera, and being able to create a world.
I guess that takes us quite nicely, I think. Just, I was thinking about, on your website, you have a photograph of you as a kid that your dad took, which is inside it's like a little doll, it's like a doll's house. And it made me think about, I wanted to ask you who made that when you were a kid.
So that was in the basement of our house in Boston, USA, when I was 2 or 3. And my dad made that house out of cardboard boxes that he just taped together.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I was looking at that and I was thinking about what you've just said about, which is world building, but also inhabiting different worlds or different aspects of the same world, if you like. So that, and I was thinking about your kind of movement through the world in these different creative registers, that there's an exploration where creativity is helping you to explore the world. But I was really struck by that because you were so young in the photograph and looked so cute. I was thinking I would be very surprised if you built it yourself because you were so young. So I thought there must be somebody in the family who'd built that. And so I wonder if you could tell us a bit about who you grew up with and where you grew up, because I think creativity does run in your family, even though you took a slightly different path at the beginning.
So my parents, they both they married in Hong Kong, and then they emigrated to the UK. My dad was a junior doctor, and he was also a pianist. And there was a certain point in his career where he could have been a pianist, but he chose to become to go into medicine, and keep music as a kind of hobby. My mum was, the full-time parent, but also a Chinese calligrapher, and she was doing that, and she still does that to this day and does exhibitions. We lived in Bootle. That's where I was born. And then we moved over to Boston in the US when my dad had a trainee position there. And then we moved back to the UK, lived in Chester, and then moved to Birkenhead.
Wow.
And so I was very creative from a very early age. So my dad was really good at building things. He was great at drawing. He was great at he built that house out of boxes. He was really good at woodwork. And my mother was more of the artist. And I was, they both encouraged me to focus on creativity and draw. And that was the one thing that I was just the best at. And I loved doing it. And I always said I wanted to be an artist when I grow up. And my mum, being the realist, was also said, she told me, it's really difficult to have a career in as an artist. So maybe find something which uses your skill in a more realistic career path. And I was also pretty good at painting models and putting stuff together in Lego and so that I got more and more interested in design as I grew older in school.
So that led you to industrial design at first, which we'll come to. But I'm curious because your grandfather was a cinematographer, is that right? Was that on
Yes.
your dad's side or your mum's side?
My mum's side. And he was a war photographer at first, and then his family moved to Hong Kong to flee the war in China, and then that's where he became a cinematographer for movies, and he was pretty good at what he did. He became quite famous, and they called him. He had a nickname, and the nickname was Sky King.
Such a great nickname, isn't it? I love that. And do you think that's what influenced your mum's kind of emphasis on you earning a living, because she saw what her own dad had to go through?
I think so. He was very successful in his profession. So, and he was, obviously a photographer as well. I wasn't that interested in photography in the very beginning. That kind of came at a much later stage. But I think my mum was just, she wanted me to succeed. She wanted me to be happy and not struggle like any parent wants.
Yes.
And so she wisely told me to, keep doing art, but, don't depend on that as a career path.
Such a curious thing to me that they ended up in the northwest of England. It's such an interesting choice, and the contrast to going to Boston. Can you remember what it was like going to Boston as a kid?
Not really. I mean, we had a basement in our house, and that was new, and it was always sunny.
Uh-huh.
Compared to Liverpool.
Yeah, which it mostly isn't. I'm just really interested in that contrast, and I think, and as you were growing up in the mostly the northwest of England, kind of were you aware of the differences in your home and in some of your friends' homes that you were growing up in?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I think I was probably the only Chinese kid in my class, and so I always felt different. And because my parents had moved from Hong Kong, um, you know, especially for my mum, English was she needed to learn English too, and so we kind of came into the UK pretty new, without the kind of backdrop of culture that a lot of people who are from here, from the UK have, and so I think my upbringing was definitely different from other families who were based, generations in the country, and so I don't know if it was because of that or just because of myself, but I turned out quite, I was a quiet kid, never really liked sport. I just enjoyed being outdoors. I enjoyed taking holidays with my family to the Lake District and going camping and hiking, and that was where I really loved to be, and I didn't really like school that much.
Yeah, it's hardly surprising. I think the school system certainly. I think it improved a little bit as you were growing up, but certainly I can imagine. The challenge of that kind of. It's interesting to me how a lot of creative people who come on the podcast have navigated difference and occasionally feeling like an outsider in different ways, and yet some of that is really channeled into their work. And so that kind of escapism, if you like, or the thing that gives you respite, or that kind of, in a way, that liminal space that we were talking about, there's something about that kind of finding that solace or finding that creativity. I'm wondering what your mum and dad, and I believe your sister's creative too, right?
Yes, she's a musician.
I know you find the art world baffling sometimes. It is. This is exactly why I built the membership. Inside the membership, artists rebuild their confidence. They reignite their pride. They recover their sense of play and finally feel like they belong. They land studio visits, sales, shows, better fees, stronger relationships, and a genuine sense of agency. Here's how it works. You get the online membership hub on your laptop or phone and gain instant access to every live session, replay and worksheet, as well as an active community, so you're never stuck waiting for an answer again. You get weekly advice sessions with me where you can ask me anything you're stuck with, and I'm going to give you straight, honest answers. And you get coaching with me at an affordable rate. Plus, there are real-life meetups, expert webinars, monthly studio visits with members, and 4 guest artist studio visits a year where you can ask your own questions live. And the best bit? It's an affordable price every month and you can cancel anytime. So please don't keep struggling on a loan. Try it. 2 months from now, you could have answers to things that have been holding you back for years. So the creativity at home, what kinds of things would they give you to read, to look at, to kind of stimulate your creativity? Or were you finding stuff for yourself?
So my sister and I, we started playing musical instruments from a very early age, very typical Asian family. Mm-hmm. I played the violin, my sister played the cello. So that was very much, a big part of growing up at home. I was really into sci-fi. I still am. Films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, was a huge influence on me, and it was strange because these films were very much kind of set in everyday life in the USA, and I'd never been to the USA, so it was like everyday life in a place I've never been before. I think I was a lot more influenced and drawn to science fiction that took place in the real world rather than science fiction that took place in a galaxy far far away a long time ago, because I think that the thing that felt familiar was the thing that kind of drew me in. It was the real world. It happened in the real world, but something was slightly different.
It makes a lot of sense, Reuben. Even just thinking about the kind of the how your parents might have experienced Liverpool and the Northwest, where there's like a familiarity, but it's a completely different culture, a different context. So there's that kind of awareness of it being something everyday, banal, kind of general life, but actually something's kind of off in some way. That is a really interesting thing, but also makes perfect sense in relationship to the photographs that you take. There is this kind of sci-fi-esque element, but also that celebrating something, even if it's fleeting, like a fleeting moment of absolute wonder, but knowing that you can't quite own it. You can't colonize it or occupy it for longer than a few seconds, I think. Really interesting.
Yeah, I was really into Warhammer, and I used to paint the Citadel miniatures, and I was also really into comics like 2000 AD, and so I think that also helped me. It kind of introduced me to storytelling and world building,
Yeah.
and all from this kind of local environment of the Northwest, which is a strange environment where you're in the city, but if you travel 40 minutes in different directions, you're in beautiful national parks.
Yeah.
And so we spent a lot of time in North Wales, in Snowdonia, Lake District, Peak District, and I think being in these places of natural beauty, they kind of fused with my sci-fi daydreaming, and so I think those two kind of fused together to create this kernel of what I still have, and what I
Yeah.
keep with me when I'm making work.
Yeah, I love that idea of you creating music at home, and obviously with your dad being a pianist, but also your mum being a calligrapher. A calligrapher is a very physical job, isn't it? In terms of actually the movement of the body in relationship to making is something. I was thinking about your relationship to the landscape and how your physical presence is so important to the results and the atmosphere, and I'm sure in an age of AI, people have talked to you about, why don't you just produce these, as digital images? And I wonder if you could say something about that, because I think I know the answer, but I'd be curious to hear your take on that in terms of the physicality for you.
Well, first of all, if I had asked AI to create something which I hadn't created yet, then it wouldn't be able to create it. It can only create it because I've already created it and put it on the internet. And so all AI can do is to take what has been already, created. It can't put something new together. To and so with my work, the work gets made in real places. It's at night. It's in conditions which are genuinely quite difficult. And that's not by accident, because the whole point is how I experience time and how I experience these places in my own way. And I think that can really change me. And as I said before, it gives you this sense of deep time.
Yeah.
And I feel that I have a very technical approach, and a lot of that could is far better suited in a studio. But I deliberately take it all out there to places where no one else would want to take, and it doesn't fit. It's really difficult to do those things in those places physically. But that's the thing that motivates me,
Yeah.
because very few people want to do that. I think that it pushes the process, and it develops the visual language to some place where I would never get to without already being there. And so I think the thing that resonates most with people is the fact that I am in this place, and I'm doing these things, and those two kind of they don't quite go together, but they do work together. This is why the behind the scenes is very important, and it matters to me now more than ever. The shot of my camera on the tripod, in the middle of the mirror, in the middle of a river, or walking through a snowstorm, carrying gear. I feel that those, that is my proof of work. That those are the receipts, and people want to see those now more than ever, to prove that it was real and not made, not faked. Because in the end, I think AI can completely simulate my work, but it can only simulate the result and never the process.
I think there is something else, I think, which is people will understand what I mean that are listening, in that I think there is a super flatness to work that has not lived through a process. And I think, the sort of the AI question really is, for a lot of artists, we had Claire Luxton on the podcast, and, she finds it very frustrating that all of her work is created through an analog process. But, that because of the tools of today, of course, people think it's so familiar to them in a way. And so she does exactly that. But I think, Reuben, you've got some amazing footage on your website of you in nature, kind of getting the shots and really being immersed. And I think there's something about the quest, which is like a pilgrimage or a spiritual quest, if you like, where the process is the point, but actually the process does get embedded into the work itself. I think, so the work that you just described for us, you didn't actually know exactly what was going to get created. There was an element of risk, there was an element of trust, there was an element of, setting up, hoping for the best, but actually then capturing something that you really had always wanted to, but weren't quite sure how to do it. And by going through that process as you do and committing to the process, something incredible is produced. So because of your quests and the hardship that you put yourself through freezing cold landscapes, through boiling hot landscapes, through kind of really difficult terrain, you've captured some incredible work, and some of it has been commissioned for major companies. Your National Geographic shot of Stonehenge, which is absolutely amazing, but you've been commissioned by some incredible people, and part of that is because of your commitment to your process, right?
Yeah, it's my commitment to the process, but also sharing the work. as far and as wide as I possibly can,
Yeah.
and learning how to speak about it. And I think what's important is that when I first started making photographs, I didn't know what the meaning was, and I was always on the search for what's the meaning. You know, I'm a photographer, but what do these mean? And we're like, but what does it mean? And you know, at first, I let the work speak for itself. You know, I showed the process, I showed my approach, and a lot of people, you know, really connected to those things. And the more I did that, and the more I kind of thought about the work, the more I did the work, and the more I wrote about the work, I learned, you know, what the why is, and you know what I'm looking for, and why I go to these places. And so I think my journey in the sharing of my pieces, from, you know, the early days on Flickr when I was posting anonymously, to now on Instagram where I have a lot of followers, you know, I've been able to tell a story which has been, you know, very authentic, and in a way that is, I feel that the artist is the best person to express the art, and you know, better than a gallery, better than a curator. I think it, you know, I think it probably it's different with with every person. But for me, I feel that I am the best person to share the story, and you know, to talk to people about it.
I love that you shared that. I think, you know, it's really something to hear. And I think for a lot of artists, they're afraid of doing that, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of not being taken seriously enough, afraid that perhaps they'll get it wrong in some way. But I think what you've just shared is really important, because sometimes the all of the ideas are in the work that needs to be made, and actually following the golden nuggets, or the kind of clues that have been laid in all the work that you're making. The work is always telling you what you're trying to do, or what you're searching for. And actually, when you are just really straightforward with people, you know, saying, well, I was interested in this, or I had a hunch about this, or I was on a quest for this, and so this is what I did. And then I'm curious, what do you think? What does it make you think about? Now I'm sharing that. You get so much more revealed back to you, don't you? And I wonder, you know, going from being that shy, introverted kid to then being on stage with Ladytron, and then talking on a stage to like over 1,500, nearly 2,000 people recently. How did you build up the courage to be public with your creativity in that way?
I started with my photography being very, very private while I was in the band, because I didn't want to be seen as kind of riding the coattails of you know, the profile of the band. And so, you know, I just enjoyed kind of, you know, making images from my travels, and it was the traveling with the band that kind of that fed the photography. And I think it was in 2013 when I decided I was going to be more public with my photography, and this coincided with a sabbatical that the band was about to take, and you know, this, I knew that this was the moment for me to start sharing my work publicly. I didn't really feel like doing music solo. You know, the one thing I wanted to do was to do photography, and I just moved to the USA. I had just started an, an artist residency in Chicago, and I was learning how to go through my archive and to create bodies of work within that, to print the work, and learning. Really, this was kind of my first period of learning about photography formally, practically, and doing things properly. And the more I did that, and the more I did projects in the USA, I was in this, suddenly in this, the land of Hollywood movies, where I was able to go to Utah and Arizona and make pictures there. I really enjoyed that, and eventually I showed my work at a portfolio review in Portland, Oregon, and social media can only get you so far, because yes, art editors and curators are on social media, but they are busy, and they're busy working on their own projects. So portfolio reviews are a way for photographers and artists to get in front of people in the industry, people who commission photography, people who run exhibitions at galleries, and to get 20 minutes of time one-on-one, and to get their feedback and critique. And that was actually how I was able to get connected to National Geographic. In the beginning, I was always thinking, oh, this work is, National Geographic aren't going to be interested in this. Is way too arty-farty. But then, I accidentally, again, it was an accident. I showed my work to the then director of photography at National Geographic, and she loved it. We kept in contact for the next few years, and then she sent me a message over Facebook. Would you like to speak about your work at the annual Storytellers Summit at National Geographic? And I was totally stunned. And but I had 10 minutes on stage to show my work and talk about my work, which was horrifying. It was terrifying. I was so nervous. I messed up my first line. But I was able to, okay, how do I express my work in 10 minutes? And so that was really, really significant for me as a milestone. And then a year or two after that, they got back in touch with me. Would you like to photograph Stonehenge for a story we're working on? So amazing. Those are the breadcrumbs. It's very easy to kind of look back, and these are the connecting dots that led to to this point in time.
There's so much in there, Reuben. I wonder, it may seem strange to our audience that somebody who's been on stage, who's music has gone 5 albums, I think you did together, right? Is that right?
6.
6, my apologies. Yeah. 6 albums. So, a lot of music together, a lot of tours, a lot of huge audiences, and a lot of success. What's the difference for you as a solo artist being on the stage and commanding a stage like that?
First of all, speaking to 1,700 people is way easier than speaking to 10 people. Because when you're speaking to 10 people, you can see every reaction. You can see eye rolls, you can see yawns. You can see people
nodding off. Yeah, got it.
But when you're speaking to 1,700 people, it just becomes just people, a mass of people. And so I'm less distracted by that. So it's easier. It is definitely easier. And also I see my all of my speaking events as really ways to share my work to as many people as possible, and ways to improve how I share my work and how I talk about my work in the most effective way. So I've learned to, in a strange way, enjoy them. And, I actually, for like 2 years, I was like, I'm going to say yes to every speaking engagement I can, just because it was my worst fear.
Amazing. That's so good, Reuben. That approach that you've got, which is learning, doing something that scares you first is how you take the sting out of it, but also learning to get good at it rather than just putting it aside because it's a fear. But also that you are a brilliant advocate for the work. You go to these extraordinary lengths to make it, and then you stand by it and say, hey, I made this thing and I'd love for you to see it and see if it connects to you in some way. And knowing that you want those conversations, that you actively, proactively want those conversations, I think is really important. That you're willing to be uncomfortable in order to learn something about the work. And I think that's a really important gift that you've given yourself, and that commitment to it. It's really exciting to hear, particularly because you said that actually, I agree with you. I think artists are the experts when it comes to their work. And actually, one of my main jobs, and certainly doing this podcast, is because I want everyone to find a way to enjoy being the advocate of the work. Because when you do take the lead and actually introduce it as if it's a lovely friend at a party, and just to see if it connects to somebody else and they might build their own relationship with the work, that means the work can be disseminated, right, to a much broader audience. But more importantly, you actually get to hear what it does inside another person. Because it's not just looking, is it? It's when you share an artwork with somebody, they feel something, and sometimes they don't have the words for it, but you can see it, or you can witness it in somebody, and you can witness it changing somebody if you are with the work itself. And I'm sharing that particularly here today because I spoke to somebody today who is so shy, who wants somebody else to represent their work so that they don't have to be with the work. They find it so excruciatingly difficult to talk about the work or be in the rooms with people. She would rather that other people just did that for her. And I was trying to express just how important it's not about being validated or, just other people approving of the work. It's that actually when you see the work that you've made from your creativity move somebody or change somebody, it has a ripple effect back to you where it changes something in you again. Not just from the point of making, but it actually moves you again in a different way. Does that make sense to you, Reuben?
Yes, it really does. And I think a lot of, I think there are artists who like to be a bubble and to not be affected or influenced in any way by the reaction that viewers have to their work. But I'm really interested to find out what people's reactions are and how my work resonates to people, especially when I share my story with them, because I think that can drive me to continue on. Because especially as a solo artist who works by themselves, hearing those things is a form of motivation and encouragement.
Yeah.
Because very, very much I kind of like, I'm not sure, if this photo is better than this photo. Sometimes I'll just ask my audience, what do you think? And why? And it's just so interesting to learn those things.
Yeah.
So for me, it's definitely an exchange of energy.
Yes. I love, I think it's on your Instagram feed. You shared a video of a before and after of a train that you took. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I thought before, just to set it up, one of the reasons I want you to mention it is because lots of artists are frightened of sharing the before and after because they think it takes away some of the magic of the work. And also, I don't know, some people get afraid of being copied or they get afraid. But I think how you did it was so good because actually it made me so much more in awe of what you made. Just seeing, to see what the thing was in the first place, and then to see what you made of it, I thought was incredible. And actually, yeah, you kind of fall in love with what you're looking at again in a slightly different way. Can you tell us a bit about that work?
That particular location is called Morant's Curve, which is like an S curve of a railway track in Banff National Park in Alberta in Canada. And I was there in January. And it's famous because of because you see the freight trains which follow this S curve, and it's against the backdrop of the mountains and pine trees, and it's stunning, and it's a very popular place for photographers and tourists. There is no timetable for the trains, so people they show up and they post up there for hours, often 90 minutes or so until a train comes, and then they take the picture and then they go. But I was there. I did multiple trips and I spent maybe 8 hours there in total, because I didn't want to just take that picture because that picture belongs to the location. I wanted a picture that belongs to me, with my authorship. And, one of the core principles of what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show a familiar place in an unfamiliar light. And so I do love going to these popular places and seeing these places and photographing them, but it's important for me to do it in a way that is unique and true to my visual language. And so I experimented and took pictures over the course of many hours. So a lot of these images are at different times of day, so they kind of work as a series. Another version of the work that I made there is this animated piece, which is basically shows the trains under a very long exposure of 25 seconds. In reality, these trains are very, very slow, because they're freight trains. They just, they just trundle along. And but what I was able to do with my animation was to make it appear as if they're so fast that they blur in the eye. So if you look at it, it does look like the train is traveling at 500 miles an hour. So I just really enjoy creating these pieces which confuse time and juxtapose different paces of time. The animation is essentially a very fast pace of time against a still image. Yeah.
Your route into music through industrial design, and then sort of co-founding the band Ladytron, that's sort of just curious whether music is still playing a part in the way that you think. When you're constructing those images, I was thinking about the train and going back to thinking about Sheffield and the industrial music at the time. And I was just wondering whether there was something in the way you see rhythm in the natural world, whether that connects to your relationship to music at all.
I think so. I think especially in my animated pieces, where I'm experimenting with time lapses and different paces of time, I'm able to create these, what I call non-linear time lapse pieces. And what is really cool and interesting is being able to produce music to synchronize and to drive those visual pieces. And so these visual pieces are actually they're synchronized in time with the music that is produced, rather than the other way around. And because I'm able to produce music on one side and to edit video on the other, I can make changes on one and then make changes on the other in a matter of minutes until everything is perfect.
Yes.
In the past, or what is more traditional, is for a director to work with a music producer or musician and to direct them. And that's always a compromise for me because I hate telling people what to do. I prefer to just do it. And so being able to do both instinctively until you've created this 15-second kind of looping animation, I find that really rewarding and enables me to merge, two disciplines together.
So you left Ladytron and work solely as a photographer, but working with commissions now. How do you stitch up your kind of art making and income generating practice?
So it all began in 2013 when I had just started living in Chicago, and I started on an art residency at a digital lab where I was working on my photography and basically more in the fine art side of photography. During that time, I was able to do my first ever commercial job as a solo artist. A friend of mine who I knew in my band days, she was a creative director at an agency in New York. And she called me up one day and said, "We are working on this kind of audiovisual commercial spot for GE. And I want you to direct this video and to make the music for it." And she said, like, the budget is this. And I was like, I fell out of my chair. And it was more than I had ever made in a whole year.
As a musician?
As anything.
Okay.
And so the concept was to basically create this 2-minute video of trains and containers, and to create a piece of music that is completely synchronized with the video. The music would be created by samples from the trains and the containers. And I worked with a team, an agency team. I also worked with another director who helped me through the visuals. And I had zero experience at that point. I was completely green, but it was an amazing experience and it was successful. And I suddenly realized that I was able to make a living from doing what I love. And it was not easy. I mean, that first job was fantastic, but the next few years where I was searching for these jobs and trying to make these connections, it was always difficult to get those opportunities. But when they came, it was, it was always difficult to price the work. I had no agent at the time. They said, "Oh, this is the budget," and I just did the work. I had no questions. But I was just overjoyed that I could do this, and get paid for doing it. And some of the jobs were music and video and photography, and then they became more and more kind of just photography, which was what I was trying to get into. And the more I did it, and the more I shared the work on Instagram, the more inquiries for shoots started to come in. And then, there were definitely moments where I thought, okay, this is not happening. I haven't had any work in 6 months, and maybe I should get back into doing industrial design again, or get back into music. And those were difficult days. But eventually, I connected with my agent, and I started to get more and more work, and also being able to sell my work directly to collectors, as fine art prints was definitely something that I enjoyed, and something that has grown since that point.
So it's directly from your website and Insta, is that right, Reuben?
It's from my email list.
Newsletter, yeah.
And so, because Instagram is kind of ruled by the algorithm, the newsletter is always going to land in people's inboxes. So I'm able to tell my story in a way that people will see if they open up the email, and not be buried in an algorithm. So I've based my most recent, I call them community print releases, where I offer quite large editions of my work, like in up to editions of 70. And in doing so, I'm able to have a more affordable price point, a more accessible price point.
Yeah.
So that it's so that most people can collect the work, and those have been really fun and interesting, and also challenging.
Challenging in what sense?
In a sense that I am maybe talking and sharing the work a little bit more than I'm comfortable with.
It's a skill set you've had to embrace. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it is, and it's just something that I quietly kind of, and still kind of reluctant to embrace. There are certain things I just won't do, because it feels silly. So I try to be as authentic as myself as possible.
What kind of thing do you think feels silly?
Sending 2 emails in a day.
Ah, okay. So more like like a company's kind of newsletter list. I get it.
A reminder.
Yes.
Things like that. And, people are busy, and sometimes, and one of the things I've realized is that people actually appreciate the reminder.
Yeah.
If they don't, then they just won't open it.
Yeah.
But some people do.
It's a great point. It's fabulous that you mentioned that, Reuben, because long-time listeners will know that we've got a few solo episodes of the podcast that I've done on why artists should have newsletters. And it's precisely because what you're sharing, I think, actually, there's an intimacy about building a relationship with an artist, where you are connecting through what they've decided to share with you. And, it's not whether it's right or wrong, or whether it's beautifully written. Actually, the choices that the artist makes are as important as what they say. So if a curator or someone like me who's used to programming artists, when I get backstory and a heartfelt message from an artist telling me something that they're not telling anybody anywhere else, I actually lean in. Like as if we were like in the pub. In fact, I've just done it with one today, actually. An artist sent me one, and I was reading through it and just thinking, God, that's a really gorgeous story. And it was quite a long one, but I took the time because I got hooked. And it was that hook because it was aimed as if they were talking directly to me. Do you know? Now, I know, because I send newsletters, that there's a community, but actually the fact that it sounds like you give a shit, I think, is part of the battle, And so I think the fact that you're doing that is fantastic. And I know lots of artists who are earning a living from cultivating even small audiences via email, and then topping it up by socials or their website. But just for those people who would be hungry to own a print by you, Reuben, what kind of price ranges do you go from and to? Just to give us a kind of a sense of the scale. So we've got a larger edition of 70, and then do you go to an edition of 5 or 3? What's your kind of scale and range?
Thinking about it like globally, my largest edition is actually a 1400, which was an open edition NFT.
Yes, okay, got it.
From 2022.
Yes,
and that was open for 24 hours or something. But that's their digital editions, obviously.
They're beautiful, your editions, actually. Felt like absolutely made sense. The work that you made for that context made a lot of sense. So did they sell well for you at the time?
Yeah, they did. And, at the other end, we have the single edition pieces, which only exist, only one exists.
Unique, yeah.
And they've sold at Sotheby's for like, I don't know, 100,000 or something like that.
Whoa, amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of insane.
That's fabulous. And that I'm imagining is the process of that unique piece and the story of that unique piece. Is that right?
My voice and my presence was crucial in telling that story to potential collectors, and rather than someone else speaking on my behalf, like Sotheby's or whatever. It was me.
Just out of interest, Reuben, how many of your fans of Ladytron and your music have transferred into art buyers?
I don't know, but there are definitely some. There are definitely a lot who have collected my work and hadn't realized that I was in the band that they loved.
Wow, amazing.
Because I think it's because I started sharing my work without connecting myself with the band. That was a conscious decision. You have to kind of do your research to know that.
Yeah. Was that for growth purposes, like because you wanted to grow as an artist and have the work seen in its own right, on its own merits? Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted it to be completely separate. I just felt like that was the way. For my prints, the most accessible pricing is just under $100 for a small print, an edition of 70. And for much larger prints, like 50 to 60 inches wide, they would be upwards of $10,000.
And a smaller edition for those.
An edition of 3.
Edition of 3. Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
And what have you noticed in terms of the kinds of people that are interested in buying your photographs? Do you think there's a sensibility, or is there any things in common that you would say your collectors tend to have?
A lot of them enjoy the same inspirations that I do. They love nature. They love science fiction, and they love kind of clever, interesting ways to show these places. A lot of them are photographers. A lot of them are appreciators of photography. And a lot of them are repeat collectors too. A lot of them say, "Oh, this is my 3rd print that I've collected," and that's really, really amazing to hear.
Yeah, that's great. That's very exciting to hear, because I think that kind of development of the practice and you taking people on a journey through storytelling is also what helps people stay close to the development of the work. And so once a champion, it's actually easier in many cases to kind of sell something else to the same person, because they want to support the artist as well as the development of the practice. What do you notice about the difference between the music world and the art world, Reuben?
Not much different at all, really. I definitely think in the commercial art world, where I'm working on projects with teams, it's a lot more structured, and roles are a lot more kind of separated, and it's more organized, and deadlines usually are stuck to. Whereas in
Yeah.
music, it's a lot more kind of free form, and roles are less cut and dried. But I love working in a team because it's such a refreshing change from me just working with myself all the
Yeah.
time. I think it's healthy to do both.
Yes. I was thinking about you being in the band and the camaraderie and the when things work well as a collaboration, there's a knowing that other people have got your back, or that you're in it together and you're having a similar experience. To go from that to then being in the middle of nowhere with one or two other kind of people, how long do you think it took you to kind of acclimatize to that new way of working?
I didn't need to. I just love being by myself. I love working by myself, and I just find it's a lot more. I just enjoyed that experience a lot better because I'm no longer thinking about other people, and I could just concentrate on the work at hand, which is a great moment to be in.
Curious, what are you most excited about working on next, Reuben?
I think my work is really all about experience, and I want to be able to share that experience to people in a way that goes beyond photography, and whether that's a digital immersive world, or if that's a print that moves on the wall. I'm really interested in pushing the medium. It's not necessarily in photography. It's about transporting people to experience things, and I think that's what I'm most curious about at the moment.
Do you know what I was thinking when I was looking at some of the videos that are about you and your process, and certainly works that you've done with brands, for example, is it feels like there's a Netflix documentary in following you on a quest. Like there's something about that, letting people into the way that you see and experience landscape and your relationship to time, that I think is really compelling, and your enthusiasm for that process, I think. I for one would certainly watch it. I think there's something about your, that kind of enthusiasm for the process of discovery, internally and externally, and I think that sort
Yeah.
of that pilgrimage, if you like, is something that I think most of us who are in the arts are kind of interested in. It's really the process is the point, right?
Yeah, and I've been very, very lucky to have been asked to take part in videos
Yeah.
about me making the work, and these have all been mostly brands that have approached me, who want to make a short film about me and my work. Obviously, there is a brand message as well, but they've all been very, very authentic to me and my work, and the product and the brand has been very much set back in many of these. So
Yeah.
it's been amazing to be able to have other people do that. But yeah, I definitely want to do something which is maybe less connected to commercial brand.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your process and some of your experiences with us, Reuben. It's been an absolute treat to be with you. Where can people stay connected with you and your work?
People can find me on my website, reubenwu.com. My Instagram is Reuben And people can also sign up for my website on my Instagram link in bio.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom, Reuben.
Thanks.
What I love about Reuben's story is that it gleefully dismantles the myth of the straight line creative career. He could have stayed in industrial design. He could have stayed in music. He could have remained a successful commercial photographer. Instead, at every crossroads, he followed the thing that made him the most curious, even when there were no guarantees waiting on the other side. What emerges from this conversation is a portrait of an artist who understands that creativity is not a destination, but a practice of paying attention. Whether he's standing in the Arctic darkness, illuminating glaciers in Peru, drawing temporary sculptures of light across ancient landscapes, or building immersive audiovisual experiences, he's constantly asking, what happens when we see the familiar differently? I was also fascinated by his thoughts on artists and commerce. Reuben makes a compelling case that artists are often uniquely qualified to sell their own work because nobody understands the story, the labour, the intention and the meaning behind it better than the person who made it. In a world where many creatives still feel uncomfortable talking about money, that perspective felt both refreshing and empowering. Perhaps the biggest lesson from Reuben is that no experience is wasted. The industrial designer, the musician, the photographer, the artist all exist inside the work he makes. What once looked like detours turned out to be essential parts of the journey. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, review and share the podcast. It really helps me to bring more conversations with extraordinary creatives to listeners around the world. Until next time, remember the path to your most authentic work is rarely a straight line. Sometimes it begins by giving yourself permission to become somebody new.